At his peak, Jay Leno wasn't just a comedian. He was the undisputed king of late-night television, commanding millions of viewers night after night with his wit, stamina, and unstoppable drive. But beyond the bright lights and laughter, his journey was marked by rivalries that turned bitter, controversies that threatened to stain his reputation, and private battles that few ever saw coming. In his later years, near-fatal accidents, heartbreaking struggles at home, and the weight of sacrifice would reshape his life in ways fans never imagined, leaving behind a story far more complex than the polished image on screen. From dyslexia to the spotlight, Jay Leno was once the undisputed king of late-night television. For more than 2 decades, he sat behind the famous desk of The Tonight Show and became a nightly fixture in millions of American households. His sharp wit, quick delivery, and ability to make audiences laugh at both everyday life and world events turned him into a cultural icon. But now, at 75, the life Jay Leno leads is not what many fans expected. His life has been shaped by struggles and controversy beneath the fame and the fortune. Jay was born on April 28, 1950, in New Rochelle, New York. He grew up in Andover, Massachusetts, as the son of 2 hardworking parents. His mother had emigrated from Scotland, bringing with her a strong sense of discipline and practicality, while his father was the son of Italian immigrants and worked as an insurance salesman to support the family. The Lenos lived a modest life, built on hard work and resilience. But Jay's childhood was far from easy. From the start, he struggled with dyslexia, a learning disorder that made reading and writing extremely difficult. In the 1950s and 60s, dyslexia wasn't as widely understood as it is today. Teachers often mistook learning difficulties for laziness or lack of effort, and Jay heard plenty of criticism in the classroom. He wasn't the kind of student who could breeze through assignments or memorize material easily, and his grades often reflected that. For many kids, that kind of constant academic struggle would have been crushing. Yet, instead of giving up, Jay turned to humor as a way to stand out. If he couldn't be the best student, he could be the funniest. Making people laugh became his survival tool, his way of winning over classmates and teachers who might otherwise have overlooked him. This skill would later become the cornerstone of his career. Determined not to let his learning difficulties hold him back, Jay pushed forward and eventually enrolled at Emerson College in Boston, where he discovered his love of performing. He studied speech therapy, a choice that was both practical and personal given his struggles with language growing up. But while earning his degree, he also began testing his comedic talents on stage. Boston in the early 1970s had a growing comedy scene, and Jay started performing in small clubs, often late at night and for little or no pay. Those early gigs weren't glamorous, the audiences were small, the feedback was immediate, and not every joke landed. But Jay had something many young comedians lacked: persistence. He wasn't afraid to fail on stage because failure was something he had lived with in school for years. He treated every performance as a chance to learn, refine, and improve. Night after night, he built a reputation as a hard-working comic who could connect with ordinary people through sharp observations and fast delivery. His big break finally came when he appeared for the first time on The Tonight Show, hosted by Johnny Carson, the legendary figure who had turned late-night television into a cultural institution. In the entertainment industry, appearing on Carson's stage was the equivalent of winning an Olympic medal. It meant you had truly arrived. Jay's performance made an impression, and he would return to the show again and again in the years that followed. By 1986, Jay had become such a trusted figure in comedy that Johnny Carson named him the permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. This was no small honor. It meant that whenever Carson was away, Jay would sit in the chair, deliver the monologue, and carry the show. Many comedians might have crumbled under that kind of pressure, but Jay thrived. He had spent years learning how to engage a crowd, how to win them over with timing, and how to keep the energy moving no matter what. His ability to handle the responsibility only strengthened his reputation in Hollywood. By the late 1980s, Jay Leno was no longer just another stand-up comic trying to make a living. He was a rising star, the man many saw as the natural heir to Johnny Carson's throne. But with that rising success came a storm that no one could have predicted. The next chapter of Jay's career would not just define his place in late-night history. It would ignite one of the most controversial battles television had ever seen. The King of Late Night. By the early 1990s, Jay Leno was widely regarded as the next in line for one of the most coveted jobs in television. But his path to becoming a host was anything but smooth. Behind the scenes, NBC was facing one of the toughest succession choices in its history. And the decision it made sparked one of the most famous rivalries in late-night TV. When Johnny Carson announced that he would step down in 1992 after nearly 30 years, most people assumed David Letterman, who hosted Late Night with David Letterman immediately after Carson, would be the natural successor. Carson himself favored Letterman, praising his sharp wit and offbeat style. But NBC executives saw things differently. They believed Jay Leno had broader mainstream appeal. His observational comedy reached a wider audience, and his work as Carson's permanent guest host had proven he could handle the job. In the end, NBC handed the role to Leno, a decision that would forever change the landscape of late-night television. The fallout was immediate. Letterman, who had been groomed for years to inherit the role, felt betrayed. He eventually left NBC and moved to CBS, launching The Late Show with David Letterman in 1993. What followed was a fierce ratings battle that defined late-night television for more than a decade. For years, critics debated who was the true heir to Carson: Leno with his broad Middle America appeal, or Letterman with his edgy, ironic style. The feud became one of the most talked-about rivalries in entertainment, splitting audiences and fueling endless media coverage. Despite the controversy, Leno proved he was more than capable of carrying The Tonight Show. From 1992 until 2009, he dominated late-night ratings, often pulling in millions more viewers than Letterman. His humor wasn't always groundbreaking, but it was reliable, with political jokes, everyday observations, and a monologue style that kept audiences coming back night after night. His approachability and ability to connect with middle-class America gave him a clear edge in the ratings war. But just as Leno seemed to have secured his legacy, NBC made another decision that threw his career into turmoil. In 2004, the network announced that Conan O'Brien, then host of Late Night, would take over The Tonight Show in 2009. NBC wanted to secure O'Brien's future with the network and avoid losing him to a competitor. The plan was simple. Leno would step aside at 59, O'Brien would take over, and everyone would move forward. When 2009 arrived, Leno kept his word and passed the torch to O'Brien. But the transition didn't go as NBC had hoped. O'Brien's version of The Tonight Show struggled in the ratings, and NBC executives grew restless. At the same time, Leno had been given his own primetime show, The Jay Leno Show, which also underperformed. By early 2010, the network made a controversial move. Leno would return to The Tonight Show, and O'Brien would be pushed out after less than a year. The backlash was intense. Many fans and critics accused Leno of undermining O'Brien and taking back a job that wasn't his anymore. The controversy damaged his public image, with some calling him selfish and disloyal. Even though Leno insisted that he had simply followed NBC's direction, the perception lingered that he had forced O'Brien out. For the first time in his career, Jay Leno wasn't just the comedian who made America laugh. He was also the man at the center of one of television's ugliest feuds. Still, ratings spoke louder than criticism. Leno resumed hosting The Tonight Show in 2010 and held on until 2014 when Jimmy Fallon officially succeeded him. By then, Leno's career in late-night television had spanned over 2 decades, cementing his place as one of the most successful hosts in history. After stepping away from The Tonight Show, Leno didn't disappear. He shifted his focus to his lifelong passion, cars. In 2014, he launched Jay Leno's Garage, a show that showcased his massive automobile collection, interviews with celebrities, and detailed explorations of car history and technology. The show ran until 2022, giving fans a new way to connect with him outside the world of late-night comedy. Beyond television, Jay has also been a prolific writer. He has contributed columns to Popular Mechanics, where he often shares insights into mechanical projects, and has written for The Sunday Times of London, discussing both cars and culture. These projects showed another side of him, one that's curious, knowledgeable, and endlessly fascinated by machines and engineering. By the time he left television completely, Jay Leno had built a career that very few entertainers could match. But while his professional life was often front and center, his personal life remained surprisingly private. And at the center of that personal life was his marriage, a relationship that has lasted for more than 4 decades and shaped much of who he is today. A love that never left. While Jay Leno's professional life has been marked by competition, pressure, and controversy, his personal life has been the exact opposite, stable and grounded. For more than 4 decades, he has shared his life with one woman, Mavis Nicholson, and their marriage has become one of the most enduring in Hollywood. At a time when many celebrity relationships seem to collapse under the weight of fame, Jay and Mavis have built something that has lasted, and it has played a huge role in shaping the man he is today. Jay first met Mavis in 1976 at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, a popular club where rising comedians of the era tested their material. Mavis wasn't a comedian. She was an activist and writer who had little interest in show business, but their paths crossed one night when she came to see a friend perform. She later joked that she never intended to fall for a comedian, but something about Jay's humor and sincerity made him different from the others. He wasn't just chasing attention or trying to impress. He was genuine and down to earth, and made her laugh in a way that felt effortless. The two began dating, and within a few years, their relationship grew serious. In 1980, they married in a quiet ceremony. From the beginning, their partnership was unique. Unlike many couples in Hollywood, they agreed early on that they would not have children. This wasn't a sacrifice or the result of career demands, it was a mutual choice. Mavis, who was deeply involved in feminist activism, believed that motherhood wasn't for her. She was open about her views, often saying that she preferred to dedicate her time and energy to causes she cared about. Jay respected that decision completely, and it never became a source of conflict between them. Throughout their marriage, Mavis has played a role that many fans don't see. While Jay was busy hosting The Tonight Show, performing stand-up, or working on his car collection, Mavis was involved in serious activism. She served as chair of the Feminist Majority Foundation, an organization focused on women's rights and social justice. Under her leadership, the group launched high-profile campaigns, including efforts to stop gender apartheid in Afghanistan. Though Jay was often in the public eye, Mavis was fighting battles behind the scenes, committed to making a difference. Jay has often said that Mavis is his conscience. In interviews, he calls her his perfect person and credits her with keeping him grounded. While he pursued comedy and cars, she provided balance and perspective. She was never dazzled by fame or the Hollywood lifestyle, and that stability gave Jay the space to focus on his career without losing sight of what mattered at home. As they've grown older, their bond has only deepened. In recent years, Jay has shared small but touching details about how he helps Mavis with memory. He keeps flashcards around their home to remind her of special moments they've shared, whether it's a trip they took together, a favorite meal, or an important anniversary. It's a small gesture, but it shows the quiet devotion he has always had for her. Of course, like many celebrities, Jay hasn't completely avoided rumors. Over the years, there have been occasional tabloid stories linking him to brief encounters with other women, including Sharon Osbourne and Sandra Bernhard. But these claims were never confirmed, and Jay has never been associated with scandal in the way many of his peers have. What's perhaps most striking about Jay and Mavis's relationship is how ordinary it has always seemed compared to Hollywood standards. They don't have children, they don't throw themselves into the celebrity social scene, and they've always kept their private life away from the cameras. While Jay's career was built on constant exposure, his marriage has been built on privacy and respect. He has said many times that fame comes and goes, but the love and partnership he has with Mavis is permanent. And yet, for all the stability at home, Jay Leno's career has not been free of turbulence. Away from the quiet comfort of his marriage, he has faced controversies that shaped his reputation in the public eye. From late-night battles to criticism over his decisions, Jay's professional life has been marked by moments that fans still argue about today. The drama behind the desk. For all his clean-cut image and reputation as one of late night's hardest-working comics, Jay Leno's career has never been without controversy. Behind the polished suits, vintage cars, and endless punchlines, there's a messier story of scandals and jokes that didn't always land the way he intended. His journey through comedy has been paved not just with laughs, but with heated debates, public backlash, and moments that nearly cracked the carefully built image of America's comic next door. One of Leno's most infamous clashes came during the Writers Guild of America strike. While late-night hosts like David Letterman and Conan O'Brien went dark in solidarity, Leno decided to keep The Tonight Show running, and that meant writing his own monologues. The move triggered outrage. The Writers Guild accused him of crossing the picket line, and fellow comedians accused him of betraying the very union that had once supported him. Leno insisted he had no choice because the network demanded a show, and he couldn't just stand there in silence. But the fallout painted him as a man willing to bend principles for ratings, and the controversy lingered long after the strike ended. But perhaps nothing tarnished his image more than his treatment of Monica Lewinsky. During the Clinton impeachment scandal, Leno made her a recurring punchline. Not once, not twice, but hundreds of times. His jokes about her appearance and private life became a staple of his monologues. Years later, Lewinsky herself admitted that the late-night ridicule left her scarred, and she reportedly named Leno as one of her chief tormentors. What was just comedy to him was deeply personal to her. In today's cultural climate, that kind of relentless mockery would have sparked outrage. However, back then, it cemented his image as a comic unafraid to go too far, even if it came at someone else's expense. Even in his later years, Leno hasn't shied away from stirring debate. In 2025, he criticized modern late-night hosts for what he saw as overly partisan comedy, lamenting that politics had consumed the genre. But the backlash was swift, and several comedians dismissed him with biting sarcasm on air. Once hailed as the neutral voice of late night, Leno suddenly found himself painted as out of touch, a relic of a comedy world that no longer existed. But not all controversies were about comedy. In 2014, Leno hosted the Genesis Prize ceremony in Israel, often described as the Jewish Nobel. His jokes about then-President Barack Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry raised eyebrows, with critics accusing him of making light of serious diplomatic tensions between the U.S. and Israel. What was meant to be humor for an international audience quickly spiraled into accusations of political insensitivity. For a man who had always walked the line between accessible comedy and pointed commentary, this was one moment where the balance tipped too far. That's not all. In 2020, when Ellen DeGeneres faced accusations of fostering a toxic workplace, many celebrities stayed quiet, But not Jay Leno. He publicly defended her, praising her kindness and dismissing the backlash as unfair. While some admired his loyalty, others accused him of ignoring the voices of employees who spoke out. In the era of workplace accountability, his defense felt to many like a misstep, showing again how Leno's instincts sometimes placed him on the wrong side of public opinion. But Jay's greatest trials weren't on stage. They were in the moments when the spotlight dimmed, and life tested him in ways no audience ever saw coming. Personal struggles and tragedies. For decades, Jay Leno built his career on humor, resilience, and an almost unstoppable work ethic. He was the man who rarely took vacations, who prided himself on never touching the money he earned from The Tonight Show, and who always found a way to turn life's oddities into jokes for his audience. But behind the steady stream of comedy and cars, Jay's later years have been marked by struggles that tested him in ways few fans could have imagined. In November 2022, Jay's love for classic cars nearly cost him his life. He was in his Los Angeles garage, working on a 1907 white steam car, a rare antique vehicle powered by steam. While inspecting the car, gasoline leaked and suddenly ignited, causing an explosion. Jay suffered third-degree burns on his face, chest, and hands. He was rushed to the Grossman Burn Center, where he underwent multiple surgeries and skin graft procedures to repair the damage. Doctors performed painstaking reconstruction work, and for weeks, Jay's future was uncertain. But true to his character, he downplayed the severity of the incident. Even as he recovered in a hospital bed, Jay insisted that he would be fine, joking with visitors and focusing on when he could return to work. His resilience stunned both doctors and fans. Within months, he was back on stage performing stand-up comedy, even with visible scars from the accident. Because laughter wasn't just his profession, it was his medicine. Despite his trademark humor, Jay Leno couldn't fully escape the weight of public scrutiny after his accident. Every photo and every headline dissected his appearance, fueling whispers about whether he'd ever be the same. And this spotlight suddenly felt harsh, invasive, and unbearably tense. In an interview, Dr. Grossman, who took care of Leno in the aftermath of his injuries, said, "The biggest challenge with dealing with Jay Leno was that the entire world was watching as it was happening. And that's a little bit of added pressure in a field that already has a lot of pressure to it." Unfortunately, just as Jay seemed to be recovering, tragedy struck again. In January 2023, barely 2 months after the explosion, Jay was riding one of his motorcycles in Los Angeles when disaster struck. He hit a hidden wire stretched across a parking lot, sending him flying off the bike. The accident left him with a broken collarbone, 2 broken ribs, and 2 cracked kneecaps. For most people in their 70s, this kind of trauma would mean a long recovery, if not retirement from physical activity altogether. But Jay once again refused to slow down. In a short time, he was back on stage, performing in front of a live audience, downplaying his injuries and cracking jokes about his clumsiness. In an interview, he said, "My recovery was 9 days. I missed 2 days of work, so it was not bad. Better than the face I had, so I'll take it." It was almost as if he was determined to prove that nothing, not even a string of near-fatal accidents, could silence him. But the setbacks kept coming. In November 2024, while visiting Pennsylvania, Jay suffered yet another serious accident. He was walking on a steep hill when he lost his footing and tumbled down, breaking his wrist and suffering heavy bruising on his face. To anyone else, 3 major accidents in 2 years would have been devastating. For Jay, they were yet more obstacles to push through. His stubbornness, the same trait that had carried him from a struggling student with dyslexia to the top of late-night television, became his shield. He simply refused to let physical pain dictate the course of his life. While these accidents were physically demanding, nothing has been more emotionally difficult for Jay than his wife's health struggles. In 2023, news broke that Mavis Leno, his wife of more than 40 years, had been diagnosed with advanced dementia. Jay had always credited Mavis as his conscience and his anchor, and this diagnosis was beyond heartbreaking. Dementia gradually robs a person of their memories, their ability to recognize loved ones, and their independence. By 2024, Mavis's condition had advanced to the point where she sometimes no longer recognized Jay, the man she had spent her entire adult life with. In early 2024, Jay petitioned the court for conservatorship, a legal arrangement that allowed him to make decisions about her medical care and well-being. The request was granted, and he stepped into the role of full-time caregiver. Friends and insiders have said that despite the enormous emotional toll, Jay has approached the situation with the same commitment and humor that have defined his entire life. Even when Mavis forgets who he is, Jay tries to make her laugh. He has described keeping flashcards around the house to help her remember their shared history. He reminds her of trips they took, milestones they celebrated, and inside jokes they built over decades. In interviews, he has admitted that caring for Mavis is not easy, but it is something he feels honored to do. Jay built his career on making strangers laugh, but now his greatest performance now takes place at home, in private moments where he fights to bring a smile to his wife's face. But behind that public image is a man who has endured more in recent years than most people will in a lifetime. And what truly defines him today is not the controversies, the cars, or even the comedy. It's the quieter choices to keep going after tragedy, to stand by his wife when she needs him most, and to embrace life at 75 in a way that few of his fans would have expected. A quiet life at 75. At 75 years old, Jay Leno's life looks very different from the days when he was ruling late-night television with millions of viewers tuning in every evening. For decades, he was one of the most recognizable faces on American TV. Yet today, he's rarely seen in public. In July 2025, he was spotted driving one of his beloved vintage steam cars, a passion he never abandoned. But what struck many fans wasn't just the beauty of the machine, but how much more fragile and thinner Leno looked. Time and the toll of accidents and personal struggles has changed his appearance, but not the spark that made him who he is. Even though he no longer headlines a nightly show, Leno hasn't completely walked away from the stage. Comedy is still part of his daily rhythm. He performs stand-up shows occasionally, keeping alive the art form that first brought him success in the 1970s. He may not fill giant arenas, but his shows still draw loyal fans who appreciate his clean humor and the same sharp timing that made him a household name. In 2021, he also took on a rare acting role, playing Ed Sullivan in the Beatles biopic Midas Man. It was a reminder that even in his mid-70s, he still enjoys trying new things, even if acting was never his main focus. Even while stepping back from public life, Leno continues to share his thoughts on the industry he once dominated. He has been vocal about the state of modern comedy, criticizing how some comedians deliberately alienate parts of the audience. Leno has always believed that good comedy should reach everyone, and he often points to the universal style of jokes that once filled late-night television as proof that humor can be sharp without being divisive. This belief, along with his unmatched work ethic and famously clean comedic style, is part of why he remains respected in the comedy world, even if he isn't on television every night anymore. His legacy has also been recognized in big ways. In 2014, he was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, cementing his place alongside the legends of the medium. Right now, Jay Leno is not the man fans once saw battling David Letterman for ratings supremacy, or the host who became embroiled in the messy transition with Conan O'Brien. Instead, he is a man who has weathered accidents, endured personal losses, and now spends his days caring for his wife while finding small pockets of joy in comedy and cars. His life is quieter, more personal, and far less glamorous than fans might have expected. But it is real, grounded, and built on loyalty and love. And maybe that's the biggest surprise of all. Is Jay Leno your favorite late-night television host? Tell us in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.